I'm going to share the exact decision framework to expand your e-commerce brand globally without destroying your margins or even burning out your team. Now, this is the decision framework that took my brand from $0 to $90 million in just 4 years by helping me say no to international expansion like over 4 times and saying yes only when it mattered. And this is the exact same framework that I used to coach over 150 different brands in the last 6 months. So if you're thinking my business is different or maybe I'm not ready, that's exactly what this framework tells you. And don't sleep on this, because if you do this right, you can double your business in just 12 months.
All right, so you're an ecom brand that wants to potentially expand your market into different international markets, but you're probably thinking about which market do I go to? How do I think about which one's the best one to approach? How do I go about testing, validating, all that stuff, which I'm going to address for you guys in this training, along with all the legal and compliance stuff, how to think through that. But first of all, before you go launch into international market, I want you guys to understand a core mental model, right? And that is that it's not just about getting more sales. It's about how do I clone my business into another market with minimal friction. Because every new market, I'm telling you now, adds new psychology, new costs, new compliance, and new failure points. Whether that's you going from even US market to UK or US to Australia, Australia to US, even those little minor changes still adds a new layer of complexity, psychology, and costs. And you only want to expand when the opportunity is kind of greater than the operational drag. And I think a lot of the founders, including myself at times, just didn't understand what hidden costs were involved in going to new markets. From an operation perspective, it was marketing, whether it was from a logistics perspective, all of that actually makes a big difference. And if you don't think about all the different consequential effects of going to a new market, and that starts eating at your margin before you know it. So before you make the decision, you need to think of it through 3 different layers, right? You have the opportunity layer. Is there actual really like demand in that market? What margins are you going to have? What's the buying power, the market size of that country? Then you have like frictional layer. In terms of your logistics, your marketing, can you reuse creatives? Can you use the same landing pages, the language, the culture? It's all different. And I'm telling you now, the culture is different. If you're having US creators or UK creators or Australian creators, even those subtle changes are very different. Even logistically, it's very different. The margin profile is very different. It costs more to ship, within Australia or to Australia than it does within the UK compared to US. It's all very different, which allows for different acquisition costs, different CPMs. Everything's different, right? It's not all the same. And then you have capacity layer. So do you have a team that can adhere and have the capacity to manage those other markets? Do you have the cash and margin to invest into other markets if you're not profitable for a period of time to invest in order to get it right? Because it doesn't mean you're going to go in month 1 and be profitable. Sometimes it might take you 6 months to be profitable inside of a market. Can you afford that? Can you afford to break even for 6 months? Can you afford to lose money for the first 3 months, right? And how mature is your business and the systems? Because if you don't have a mature system in terms of your team, your business, your operations, your finances, and stuff like that, your marketing, adding this layer of complexity will probably do more harm than good to your business.
So if you're serious about breaking out of that 6-figure hamster wheel and want to see how the system would work inside of your brand, hit the link below and book a call with my team. We'll audit your growth engine, we'll show you exactly where you're leaking profit and map out your next $1 million move. No agency, no fluff, just real strategy.
So stage 1 is like, pre-expansion readiness. This we're going to try and decide if going international is even the correct growth level for you right now. And the way to do that is to always go for the growth triangle. So you can grow via markets, channels, or products. Now, the question becomes, which one is most efficient? Is it more efficient to grow via markets or grow your channels or grow your products? Always remember the rule, do more of what's already working, then do it better than new. And markets is very much a new thing. It's not more, it's new. So the way you want to go about trying to understand, and I've got I'm not sure if you can see it here, I've got this kind of checklist for you guys that I'll share as well. But you want to use the ICE scoring for international markets or even whatever else you're looking to do in the business. Which one's having the highest impact? Which one's the easiest to do? Which one have the most confidence? So impact, confidence, ease. Put the new initiatives, whether it's new markets, new channels, new products, score it and see where you end up, right? That's a good little mental model exercise to understand whether you should be entering a new market, new channel, or release some new products. Now, let's say the decision is to go to market, right? Now, how do you just select what market and what's your expansion strategy? First of all, you need to probably pick a couple markets to go and test, right? So the market selection matrix looks like this. Which one has the most demand? which one has buying power in terms of its GDP, how complex is the logistics, how complex is the marketing, and what operational drag might you have in going into that market. So the formula is like demand plus buying power minus logistics, marketing, and ops drag. And only test the top 2 markets. And I've got this calculator here, I'm not sure if you can see this, where you guys will be able to actually decide which market's best based on these prerequisites. But to give you an example, like if you're an Australian brand and you want to go to the US, or an Australian brand you want to go to the EU, it's going to be completely different. If you go into the EU, there's going to be a lot more marketing complications, right? The demand will probably be slightly smaller, the competition will be still smaller, and the buying GDP is probably smaller. Logistics and stuff like that might be cheaper once you actually get into that region because it's a smaller country, depending on what country you're going to. And, there'll be compliance stuff, there'll be tax stuff, there'll be the same probably as the US. But if you're a US brand going to UK or Australia, you have to think about the complexities there. Like you have Brexit in the UK from a tax compliance perspective. So you have to have your goods in the UK, otherwise you can't really ship to them because the tax and the customs fees just are too heavy. And normally because of this, people in the UK who don't check out, don't see products that are actually natively in the UK, probably don't want to buy them because they understand the complexity of importing products in. Where Australia, the threshold's higher, so the tax implications are less. But then again, logistically might cost you a lot more to ship right to Australia than the UK because UK is smaller and the shipping ecosystem's a lot better. I'm just giving you some ideas of how different every single market can be. And once you try and score them on each of their own level, then you can understand what's the best move for you. Now, in terms of legal and tax, right? So the key principle is that, and get legal advice, don't just take my word for it. If you don't have an entity, you don't have staff, you don't have an office in those countries, normally only thing you own is sales tax and VAT, right? You don't need to incorporate a company to operate in those regions. You still must, pay import duties and GST and stuff like that. Make sure your product certifications and claim restrictions and compliances all in, and trademarks are all in check. But you don't have to actually have a company to operate in those regions. Legal and tax compliance, these are only things you need to take care of. There's companies like Numeral and Yonder Tax that will actually take care of that. And if you're shipping from outside of those countries, things and services like Passport that will actually show the duties and customs fees at checkout to the customer, and you can pass that on. Now, step 5 is all about the market testing and economics. So let's say now you've got 2 different markets you want to test. They're 3 pretty much stages, right? You go through. First one is like a smoke test. You ship from your current warehouse because at the start it's not about like optimize for profit. It's trying to get some signals as to which market's the best to go to. And to give you an idea for, let's say for Cure, when we wanted to go to international markets, what we did, we set up localized landing pages in say France, Germany, Italy. We ran existing creatives with AI, dubbed the voice in those markets. We kind of saw what market was best. Then stage 2 went to local language and local creatives in terms of we started optimizing the page a bit more for local language instead of just like a translation. Then we got local creators because we didn't want to use AI because once again, those AI translations are never like perfect. That was stage 2. And then stage 3 is like we set up a whole different French website. We, French Instagram, French emails, retention system, French website, took stock to Europe, etc. That's like the 3 different stages. And we did one after another once we validated it through those 3 stages. We didn't just go all out and started opening up, French store, Italian store, a Spanish store, and gone all local creators in all those regions. Like logistically, that would have been an absolute nightmare from a resource perspective. So we took it in stages. And the same thing, like if you're, say now an Australian brand, you go into the US or you want to go to the UK, the first thing I would do is be shipping the product from a current warehouse and just make sure, you're going to eat some margin to start with. So you don't want to add any extra operational stress. Or you can ship from where they're manufacturing, like maybe China if you can. If you're manufacturing in China, I would send to those regions directly, like drop shipping from the factory in order to validate those markets. And then, I'd reuse the same creatives because it's all in English. But I'm telling you now, if you're in the UK, you need UK creators. If you're in Australia, you need Australian creators. If you're in the US, you need US creators. Sure, there will be some cross-contamination in terms of what will work, but the efficiency is nowhere near the same. For us, even last week, we had a creative that went nuts, and we have a campaign where we have US and UK the same because our logistical costs are very similar and contribution margin costs are very similar. So we usually bucket those two countries together. And the creator went nuts, but 95% of spend went to UK because it was a UK creator and it was converting better in the UK. So this does matter. But stage one, use it all the same, test those different regions, Australia, UK, or maybe Canada. If you're in the US as an example, and you're looking to open up a new market, and then once you start seeing that working, then okay, let's find some new local creatives. Okay, let's find a new warehouse. You guys get it now. So the start, do a bit of a spray, sacrifice margin. You want to actually calculate also what your contribution margin will be if you optimize everything right, obviously. So when you do go to scale that you'll be able to be profitable at the start. The idea is to test as much as you can for the least amount of operational and marketing and logistical stress you can to get some inputs as to what market is going to work best for you. And then the next step is to calculate your contribution margin per country, as I just mentioned before, taking in the VAT, the duties, all that kind of stuff. And this should be done for every single country separately, not all the same. And then the step 6 is when you're launching and scale. And that's when the currency can actually change, language can change, delivery times, returns. You can have local UGC, local creators, local customer support, and you track everything as a separate region in kind of your P&L, and you measure each region separately, right? Because they'll have to stand on their own. They'll all have different margins, they'll have different CACs, they'll have different everything, and the art that's going to be up to you is understanding what contribution margin you're going to allow for each country, because if you can get the contribution margin ratio of say 30% in the US, it doesn't mean you can get the same in Europe. Europe has smaller and lower buying power. You have to sell maybe the product at a lower retail price, which maybe you're happy to run at 20% contribution margin over there. These are all things you're going to have to work out and test based on your business, but historically what I found with our business and others is that Europe maintains a slightly lower contribution margin at scale than maybe the US and vice versa. So make sure you try and work that out. But that's the system there. Start with the growth triangle. Understand if the right thing to actually do is to go and expand in different markets. First of all, use the ICE framework to identify the next best step for you. Then use the market matrix that I'm going to share with you guys here, and legal compliance stocks, unit economics, stuff like that, that you guys can play with here to make an assessment as to what's best. And then you can localize and scale once you've tested and validated. So yeah, I hope that helps. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Drop me in the comments below, and I'll chat to you guys in the next one.